But I was hopeful of possibly having someone here to speak today from the Gateway MS Society. But there's a very good reason why there is not somebody here from the Gateway MS Society today, and that's because they had a huge event last weekend. And I don't know how many of you have seen it or have seen the information, but this was the 31st year of the Bike MS bike ride. And you might have seen a lot of these signs out and about in our community. I actually stole one from Edwardsville yesterday that hadn't been collected yet, with the permission of the MS Society. That relocated this year to Lewis and Clark Community College as the home base, which made me very happy because this was actually my 8th year of riding the MS bike ride. So for a number of years, it's been in Columbia, Missouri. I think they did that with the idea that it's the St. Louis office that services that portion of Missouri as well as Southern Illinois for the counties that the Gateway MS Society services, but they were drawing people from Kansas City. I actually ride for the PWC team, PricewaterhouseCoopers, and how that came about is some of you may know, I think a few of you do know, but my father has MS, and he was diagnosed in, I was trying to think of this morning, I believe it was 1998, so he would have been diagnosed at the age of 46. And for some time after that, just kind of learned about the disease, and he continued actually to be able to work, although with some difficulties. He was an auto worker out at General Motors, so we lived in Wood River. He drove to GM every day, would work his shift, drive home, and one of the main symptoms of MS, a little bit of what I'm going to talk about in a few minutes, is fatigue. So working second shift, coming home in the middle of the night. It was kind of a mixed blessing for me because in 2006, GM offered an early pension buyout right before the big bankruptcy and all those things happened, which was also when my daughter was born. So with some modifications, my dad got to be grandpa and take care of her. But again, because of the disease, we did some special things. For example, he would never pick up my daughter or any of his other grandchildren while he's standing because he's very uneasy and uneven on his feet. So even when he would care for her during the day, he had it set up where he could sit in a chair and move her to the playpen and all sorts of different things that we did. So that's my connection to, my immediate connection to MS. I know that a few people in here know someone who has MS. I don't know how many people know somebody who has MS. So one person every hour in the United States is diagnosed with MS. It's, I think the number that I pulled out of here from this past weekend was 2.3 million people currently who deal with the disease. As I say, in my family, my father was diagnosed. My stepmother's cousin deals with MS, which also, while in my family, no genetic connection there because it's through my stepmother's side of the family. And actually, about a year and a half prior to the time that my father was diagnosed, I worked with a woman who was very young for having been diagnosed. She was in her early 20s when she came to find out. So it's a disease that impacts a lot of people's lives, but I don't know how many people are very familiar about it. So to bring this full circle, in 2007, one of my best friends, she's also an East Alton Wood River graduate, we've been friends since 7th grade, I think. She works for PricewaterhouseCoopers, and she said, hey, I think we should get healthy and ride this bike ride because it's for MS, and we'll ride for your dad. We'll ride on the PWC team, and we'll start riding. So that was in 2007, and we went to Columbia, and it's called the MS 150. I will be honest with you and tell you I have never yet ridden 150 miles. 150 comes from if you ride 75 miles on Saturday and 75 miles on Sunday. Back at that point in time, the shortest option was 40 miles. So we felt like we were champions of the universe when we got done with that first 40-mile bike ride in Columbia, Missouri. I had purchased like a $50 bike from Walmart, and that was a very bad decision to try and do. I rode on it actually for 2 years before I invested some money in a nicer bike. So that's why I'm dressed casually today. This is one of the shirts that we got for participating over the weekend. But what has happened since 2007 is, as I say, my friend Courtney and I started that year. 2 years later, my brother joined us in 2009, and we've continued to ride since that time. In 2012, some of you might recall that I had 2 back surgeries. So in 2012, I was knocked out of participating. I actually thought I was going to be recovered enough from the first back surgery, and then I ended up in the second back surgery 3 weeks prior to the event. So that year, my good friend and my brother still rode. So my friend Courtney, who brought me into this process, and her company sponsors folks, she has ridden now 9 consecutive years. Next year is going to be her 10th year. Would have been my 10th if I hadn't had to sit out, and my brother's ridden with us every year since then as well. So I thought it was timely, even though I couldn't get someone here from the MS Society, because number one, that's why I'm never around during the soapbox. It may work out better in the future, but in the past I'd always literally be out of town down in Columbia, Missouri for this event. But just as of this year, as I say, with the 31st ride, it's now in our area. I don't know, did anybody see all the bikers around over the past weekend?
We called that Moro.
Well, and that's one reason why I wanted to talk about it, because I've heard a lot of folks who I think are kind of frustrated by it having been moved here. I know that on Sunday was the day I did my ride, which you're all going, that wasn't soapbox day. Saturday was soccer day for the daughter, but we were kind of having that conversation earlier. They had this year 4 different routes, and what they did was offered a 25, a 50, a 75, and 100. And depending upon which day you rode a different route. So I know that on Saturday, when I was watching soccer down at the SIUE soccer fields, I saw them go by on the trails, and that was the people who were riding 75 or 100. On Sunday, my friend Courtney and I rode 75. My brother made it to 52, which, considering he only wanted to ride 40, not the brother who's the East Alton police officer, but my other brother, he had not trained at all. He had aired up his tires like 2 days before. So to make it 52 miles was pretty impressive for him. And I was really impressed. But on Sunday, I know that our 75-mile route, we took off from Lewis and Clark, headed all the way down Seiler Road, and then up Fosterburg. But I had heard that Saturday was the big, I think Moro, was at the big Moro yard sale. And so there was all that going on. So I think there's going to be a little bit of growing pains as they transition to this area. And I'm just concerned that folks are going to get really frustrated and not welcome this event into our area. I can tell you that the riders loved it. Lewis and Clark Community College welcomed them with open arms. People come and they will camp all weekend long in tents. I've never done that. I always stayed in a hotel when I went to Columbia, but they'll come, they'll set up a tent on Friday night, ride all day Saturday, tent camp again on Saturday night, and then ride all day on Sunday. I mean, and those people are the truly committed folks. And what Lewis and Clark did for them this year was made it much nicer, because when we were in Columbia, we were either at the fairgrounds or at a horse, like horse barn stable area. So Lewis and Clark opened up their showers at the gym, their pool, the commons to eat at. They actually even had an ice sculpture of a huge bicycle for them to welcome them as they were coming in. So I know the MS Society said they were enamored with the welcome that they received. But even as a rider, I can tell you that they definitely were having some growing pains moving this year. They didn't have routes very well marked. So I think that some of the riders coming through areas were probably trying to figure that out. They have these signs up, and I know that I was out for a practice ride the weekend before, and I saw them up on the trails a lot. But Mark is correct, they ride on the roads a lot. And down in Columbia, there were no trails. We rode every place on the road. But in terms of also a potential economic impact for the people who stayed at hotels or got food out, different things like that, I asked them yesterday, they emailed me and they said they don't have their numbers final yet, but they believe they had 2,500 cyclists over the 2-day event. And again, a lot of people were not from here. They were at least from across the river in St. Louis. They believe that they're going to raise $1.8 million from the bike ride. So for a little bit of inconvenience for our folks, I mean, I'm hoping that, number one, that it has a positive economic impact, but also it is such a big fundraiser for that group and that organization. There's a statistic that I printed off, and the MS Society is an organization that only gets approximately 10% of their national funding from federal or state governments. Everything else is private donations, largely raised from things like the MS bike ride. Another big thing that they do that I'm contemplated doing now that my back has been doing better is they do a mud run. And I have a friend who is from the Staunton area. Her mother suffers from MS, and she does the mud run every year. There's a walk, there's different things. But the big thing that I see, I think they're going to try and keep it here in the future, is this. It'll always be the second weekend in September, if they keep it out of Lewis and Clark, that we'll see this large influx of bike riders. But I know that I heard even in Edwardsville, being up at the soccer game, people were like, where are all these bikes from and what are they doing? And they're in the way and they're in traffic. And I mean, if any community can absorb those folks. I mean, Edwardsville's used to having bike riders. They've got a lot of biking events up there. So I think that's why they looked at moving it over there. I can tell you that on Sunday, on our 75-mile route, we actually went all through Macoupin County. So we started out at Lewis and Clark, headed out towards Staunton, Gillespie, Royal Lakes, Shipman, Brighton, and then came back down to Lewis and Clark. I am not a fast bike rider. That took me all day on Sunday, all day, because I am not a speed rider, but we made it through. So I'm not going to prolong it, but I did bring a little bit of, just to kind of show. Last year was the 30th anniversary when I got to ride. I did achieve a status last year of a spokes club, is what they call it, because of how much I raised to donate to it. Again, with it being personal to my family. I don't have a medal for every year that I've ridden because they only give the medals out on Sunday. So some years I ride on Saturday, some years I ride on Sunday. It kind of depends on how things were working out, having to go out of town, but they give the folks medals out. But again, the MS Society, not just through things like this, you may recall that back in, kind of babbling, but back in 2008, that my uncle was a finalist in the World Series of Poker. That was one of the patches that we all wore on our shirts and where part of his money went to, because that's my dad's younger brother by about 18 months. So obviously something that our family holds near and dear to our heart. But it is a disease that, for those of you who don't know someone who's impacted by it, does not typically itself cause your death, but it does have a tendency to shorten people's lives on an average of about 7 years, is what the statistics say. And a lot of times it can arise from complications. I had a good friend in law school whose mother broke her leg. She went into the hospital, she got pneumonia, she never got better. And it's just because your body, MS is a disease that fights itself. Your body begins attacking your own nervous system. It's similar to ALS, but ALS is a much quicker acting progressive disease, and MS takes different forms and does different things. And on a personal note, I can tell you that in December of 2014, my dad got caught with that flu bug that people were getting, and he spent the next 3.5 weeks in rehab, and that's the longest that he's been in the hospital since he was diagnosed. But we were, for a little bit, really worried there that this might be one of those things that he would not bounce back from. And when I say that, my dad is, trying to calculate this in my head now, 62 as of this year. So in my mind, still a very young man to be dealing with this and to have dealt with it for as long as he has. Some other folks that you may know of, Richard Pryor is probably one of the famous ones that you know that MS did. An interesting story that I read a few years ago was Annette Funicello kept it quiet for a long time. She did not share with folks. She felt like it was very personal to her, that it was a disease that she was dealing with. And sadly, she finally started coming out in the press because things like the National Enquirer and different of those kind of rag magazines were speculating that she was an alcoholic because she couldn't walk straight, she couldn't speak well, her speech was slurred. Well, those are all side effects of MS, and that was when she finally decided to go public with it. So with that, I'm not gonna keep you long today, but just kind of a personal note and story about this now coming to our local community, and I hope that they can work the bugs out, and that the communities embrace this group and the positive things that they're trying to do for people. That's all I have.